Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Kashrus, presented by the Kashrus Awareness Project in conjunction with Torah Anytime. Today, I am privileged to be joined by Rabbi Moshe Kaufman, Kashrus Administrator at the KVH and co-chair of the ACO Camp Kashrus Committee. Rabbi Kaufman, it's a pleasure to have you here.
It's great to be back.
Last week, we spoke about the general Kashrus in camps. You gave us an update on what you've learned over the last year. This week, I'd like to actually take a walkthrough through a typical camp kitchen, and as we go through the kitchen, you'll point out with each, whether it's equipment or machinery or whatever it is, or setup, and give me kind of a brief summary of what the red flags would be.
It's a great idea. You mentioned right away a typical camp kitchen. I'd say for the most part, there's a typical camp kitchen, but there's a quick divergence on that. You get a call from a camp. Can you help us kasher a kitchen? Can you help us set up a kitchen? We're renting it from a campsite that rents the camps every year. It's a treif place, so you help kasher. The hard part's not the kashering. The difficult part is going to be taking a treif operation and setting it up for kasher. You move into a new house that had a treif kitchen. You got to deal with one sink now, you got to deal with one counter, and you make it work until you can figure out, hey, I'm not saying it, halachically you can figure out how to work with one sink, and you have the racks and whatnot. Translate that now into daily meals from anywhere between, I think the smallest camps have what, 80 campers, 50 to 80 campers, to over 1,000 people you're feeding. 1,000 meals.
3 meals a day.
3 meals a day. Now go deal with that with one sink for milchiks and fleishiks and deal with that. Mm-hmm. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. So let's talk typical. You're going to have, if in an ideal situation, you're going to have two completely separate kitchens. Lockdown, you can't get from one to the other. You're very often not going to have that. Even a good camp can set up a scenario. A lot of this depends on your plumbing. Every time you're going to run plumbing to a new area, you have to think about your hood systems, your extractor fans. It's expensive setting this stuff up. If you duplicate it everywhere in a completely different area of a building or in 2 buildings, it gets expensive. So another typical scenario you'll have is back-to-back cooking lines. And there are kashrus concerns that have to be addressed. So you'll have a big, huge center hood in the middle of a big rectangle room or square room, and you'll have basically 2 lines that run down the center of the room, back-to-back with each other, parallel.
Mm-hmm. Milchiks and fleishiks.
How the hood is set up could potentially be a problem. It's beyond the scope of this session right now, but the basic system should work. There's no crossover between the 2 sides. Potentially, if someone's using a steam generator to power steam, you could be powering milchik and fleishik steam-operated equipment. If there's what we call a condensate return, which means if it's pressurized, that's got to go back somewhere when it cools off. So that could be going back to the boiler. It doesn't have to. It could go down a drain. These are things to watch out for. But moving on from there, you have convection ovens typically have a safety mechanism. Well, what happens when you open those doors and that fan's blowing all that hot air in your face? It's not comfortable. So they have a safety switch. It shuts off. Well, what do you do if you have food in there on Shabbos? You want to take out all your food. You want to do everything. As soon as you open that door, the switch shuts off the fire, shuts off the oven. You got serious kashrus concerns. Take it a step further. Your daily cooking, every time you open the door, the fire shuts off. If someone has kashrus in mind, there are companies that make kashrus friendlier. I shouldn't say friendly, but friendlier versions. They have ones with pilots. They have ones with Sabbath mode. Just like you have consumer ovens, you have some of the big companies making Sabbath mode commercial convection ovens. These are all worthwhile things to know when you're investing in it. Even if you didn't get that, there are simple mechanical overrides to work on these things. It's just a small sampling of what you're dealing with in terms of the equipment. I was recently in a scenario. I walked in somewhere and they had their pans. And another thing we talk about is, are milchiks and fleishiks adequately separated? Painted blue, painted red, whatever colors you choose. Clear, you walk in there, everything's smart. These things need maintenance. It's going to rub off. Everyone has all different scenarios how to control it, and that's really not the focus over here. It's just an example of things we're looking out for. But I did walk into a place, there were 2 different incidents I had, and I think kashrus professionals will say that they've seen this all the time. You see a nice pattern. You see a stack of sheet pans, blue, red, maybe a little yellow and green mixed in, blue, red, and what's going on? The other things we'll see, you walk into a hotel that often does kosher things, and you see the stack of treif sheet pans, and you see some blue sheet pans, and there's some red sheet pans. Those are all the ones the caterers left over there that they forgot. So you see that as well. It's something you see. Another camp, we saw this in a camp. They brought out lunch, and there's a speed rack, which is those rolling racks that they have the sheet pans on with all the food. They bring it out. I saw blue, red, and yellow sheet pans on the same rack. It was a power of lunch. Theoretically, okay. It was a power of lunch. They were serving some milchik stuff, but not there. What does that say to how they're segregating everything in the back, we call back of the house in the kitchen, on the same rack? So some of the things. You talk about ingredient control. You say, oh, we only buy Hamish products. It's a very unfortunate statement we have to make. There are mistakes that happen. That's not as unfortunate. Hamish distributors sell things that I believe they know are not accepted by any of the major national agencies. Forget about Chassidish Hashgachas. They have items that, and we know this because we're constantly rejecting these items.
Well, can you give an example?
You take, for instance, you take certain vegetables. There are certain vegetables that we all know that are muchsik b'telayim or close to it, or mian hamatzi. They're not accepted.
Or difficult to clean for sure.
You have this version
Right.
in a canned vegetable. And right when you see these, it's a big red flag. Like, how is anyone certifying XYZ? And if you have the secret, please tell us all. We all get requests for this, so let us know how we're doing this. And that's why you almost never see a good hashgacha. There are scenarios where hashgachas are doing special lot by lot. So sometimes you'll see it never has a good hashgacha and they're distributing XYZ product. And sometimes you'll see the same product that sometimes has a good hashgacha depending on which lot. And sometimes when it doesn't have that hashgacha, why all of a sudden does this product not have a star K or an OU or a KVH or a Kuf K? All of a sudden it's got a hashgacha that no one recognizes. There's a reason for that. These products are distributed by Hamish distributors.
So, good question about that, because you shifted from the in-kitchen kashrus concerns to ingredients.
Yeah.
Typically in a yeshiva and camp setting, who's in charge of ordering and reviewing the list? Do they just go over a master list from a kosher distributor and assume that if distributor ABC is distributing it, that it must be acceptable? What's that process like?
The answer is often it's the chef who's in charge of ordering. Sometimes it's a kitchen manager. Those are usually the two people who would be ordering, a kitchen manager or a chef. And very often, you're right, they're just going to order whatever a Hamish distributor allows them. Sometimes they have a list of approved hashgachas, but you cannot rely that it's a Hamish distributor. Any kashrus professional will tell you, we've seen it time and time again. The next level is, did I get what I ordered?
So that's reviewing the order upon arrival,
Who's checking in the order?
matching it up with what we
And
ordered.
very often, just because the chef ordered what he wanted, one of the guy working for him is checking it in. And yeah, they know hashgacha. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but you're relying on a guy to check in the order very often. And sometimes, by the way, orders are not checked in at all. I once asked someone, I said, this is something a mashgiach should be doing. And you check in orders for two reasons. Number one, you want to make sure you got what you ordered. Number two, from a kashrus perspective, we want to make sure we got the hashgacha that we're accepting. Often I've tried to tell, I work with clients to say, you know what, we want to streamline your business. We don't need to be redundant here. So yes, the mashgiach, if he's checking it in anyway for hashgacha, he can check in the order, he can check the bill of lading, he can check the invoice. I have no problem with streamlining people, helping people out like that.
I remember, I want to mention a scenario I'm just remembering that I heard about, where a camp, I believe in the Catskills, they were serving supper that night or whatever it is, and they were out of an ingredient, let's say tomato sauce, and they couldn't wait till the next delivery would come because they needed it for the meal that day. So they dispatched one of the camp workers to the local town, where they have a kosher supermarket or a ShopRite or whatever it is, to pick up, a whole lot of, let's say it was tomato sauce. Yeah. And that's a scenario where even if you have a good system in place for intake on major orders, over here you're sending someone out, you have to make sure when they come in that they got the right product and so on and so forth.
Yeah. 100%. And we've all heard stories over the years where the guy ran out, supposed to get kosher hot dogs, got treif hot dogs. There were scenarios. These things happen. You get Pesach time, the guy got chametz instead of Pesach stuff.
Sure.
These things happen. That's one, and that's very, very common. I asked someone, I was trying to help them out, streamline their process, So maybe the mashgiach checking in the products for hashgacha, let him check the bill of ladings. He's like, we don't do that. Like, you're running a business? How do you know you got what you ordered? How do you know they didn't short you?
Meaning not even from a kashrus standpoint.
Kashrus, like, how are you running your business that way? Shrug your shoulders. And if that's their attitude towards their business, it's a similar attitude towards kashrus. We do it and hope for the best.
So going on in the kitchen itself, what other concerns did you find?
We got our ingredients now. How are we cooking them? Bishulachim. We mentioned some of them. Are there pilots? Who is in the kitchen? Let's break it down into several categories. You have number one, bishulachim. That's the first thing you start off with.
So if a fire goes out, what's
5
preventing,
a.m. we got to get
the non-Jewish worker from turning on the fire?
So you have a firm chef. Right. Is he there at 5 a.m. every day doing breakfast? Maybe he is. Does he not go out to daven? I hope he does. I hope you have a system that allows him. Right? Again, sometimes a guy, especially someone in hashgacha, has to miss davening. I understand, but to have a system where a guy can never daven with him, it does happen. But I would hope in a scenario where it should be so easy to relieve someone, I hope he's going to daven. So that's the first thing. Who is there at 5? Who's starting the morning? Again, there's ways to deal with it. Are there pilots? What kind of pilots do you have? Do you have, different hashgachas have different levels? Most of us would agree that if you have a central pilot on a stove, which means there's one pilot feeding multiple burners, it doesn't become part of the fire. that qualifies as Eish Me'esh, which we only samech on b'diavad. If you have a pilot that becomes integrated with the fire, and it's a fire that could cook on its own, very often we actually use a screwdriver to raise the level of the pilot. That, it's a small fire. You can cook eggs on there. You can cook, you can cook on it, and it becomes integrated with the main fire. Many hashgachos will rely on that lichatchila as the fire, and that doesn't help for a Bishul Yisrael Beis Yosef, where the Yid has to put the food on the fire.
Right. Right.
Are you telling campers, if you're in a Sephardi camp, are you telling campers that it's Bishul Yisrael Beis Yosef? Well, that means that's even more concerning, because it doesn't help that you just turned it on.
Then you really need, for a Sephardi clientele, you need a Yid there all the time.
I'd say you want a Yid there all the time, even for all clientele. It's just good policy. Could you get away without it certain times of the day? Yes, but then who's checking up on them? If the guy knows from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., no, there's no one there, that's bad policy, and you're almost guaranteed to have an issue. A scenario. Yeah, the guy says, I ask someone to come turn on the fire for me to make the eggs in the morning. They served eggs in the morning, I don't know, once a week, every day, I don't know what it was. I ask someone to come do it. Okay, let's say we want to do that, because I believe there's yeshivas that have that scenario as well. Is there a sign-up sheet? I mean, is there a log? The person who turned on the fire? Nah, he just grabbed someone. How do you know he did? There's no one passing by. He's going to be 15 minutes late. You think he wants to be 15 minutes late? No one ever checked in on him. You don't even have a mirsus.
Right.
Someone doesn't. I didn't think of that. That's what we're talking about, having a system. Don't pay someone. Just have a system in place where either it's the same person every day. At the very least, have a log of who turned on the fire. Someone can go question that person. Oh, you turned on the fire? And that doesn't address if the fire went out or not. But at the very least, have a way to verify what happened. And we haven't even talked about Shabbos yet. We briefly mentioned making sure that your equipment is Shabbos friendly.
But on Shabbos, you have Chazara, you have Bishul.
You also have, we talk about not having systems in place, not having kitchens locked down. What happens when you have your Mesifta Bachar break into the kitchen and take chant, and they use a milchik sheet band to bring it out? Ma'aseh Shahaya.
So you tell me we have to train the Bachar?
No, or you have to make sure they can't get into the kitchen, which you can do.
Yeah.
It's possible. And if not, if there's a Bachar who's designated, you're better off giving them cholent than have them break in and not only steal the cholent, but mess up the kashrus. So you're better off making sure there's a system for it. And if you're already doing that, make a system where you don't need chazar. Have a separate cholent. You could do chazar, but there's ways of doing it. And making sure it gets done properly is obviously more difficult.
Sure. How about Basar and Salmanayan issues?
So you talk about Basar Nifka B'Yarakim. I think we interchange those two a lot, which they're not really. For sure, B'Diavad. We don't have a problem with Basar Shinasam. Basar Shinasam and I would apply like in your backyard. Right. We're talking more Basar Nifkat or Nishlach B'Yarakim, different Samanim and Shulchan Aruch, right? You have those issues to some extent, and if you don't have a mirsus of Yotze V'Nichnas would solve those issues for the most part, without getting into too many details. Yotze V'Nichnas solve. If you don't have a proper Yotze V'Nichnas, then yes, you're going to run into Nifka B'Yarakim. The guy knows I'm in charge of the kitchen for 3 hours a day. The kitchen's open until 10 o'clock at night and opens at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. Who's there the whole time? And at the very least, you're going to have to ask your local Orthodox rabbi if you have a Yotze V'Nichnas who has no idea. It should work for a mirsus because the guy might not know. Right. But at some point, the guy figures it out, then you have a problem. Okay. And why not train the person who's coming in there that he should actually know what he's looking for? Right. Even if he doesn't have Maker Hadin, there's a mirsus. Why not actually, if the person's going in anyway, train him to look around.
Have you implemented in some of these camps lock-up procedures,
100%.
Whether for the refrigerators, the freezers, the kitchen itself, and things of that sort?
100%. There were some camps that we walked into. Sometimes you feel like a health inspector. No one can walk out with completely unscathed. Even the best camps, he's fine. Something. Oh, what about the barbecue grill outside? Your kitchen was perfect. But you have a whole grill station outside. What about that? Are the grills locked up? And we had camps who were like, oh wow, we overlooked that. Who's swapping out the propane tank? I turned on the fire, but whoa, you switch the propane tank every time? If not, that means by the third and fourth barbecue, that thing runs out in middle, and who switched it and relit it? Right.
And Tvila was also an issue I think we discussed.
Right? Tvila, correct.
Teveling the grates.
The grates of the barbecue. These are things that are easily overlooked. They're overlooked for kashrus experts. I don't come in there with a system. That's why we have our lists. Right. We have these for a reason. We have guides for a reason for ourselves, not just for everyone else. So other places that we did implement. So most camps were very receptive, especially camps that had a good system. And we pointed out small areas.
How to make it even better.
The other thing you have is, what do you do for allergens? Let's say the whole camp's kitchen is good. Even their outside kitchens were good, the barbecue areas. A lot of times camp will have a separate, smaller, could even be a residential kitchen for children with severe allergies. Who's monitoring that? Milk exflation, how many microwaves are there? There's always going to be a microwave there. Who's monitoring that? And very often, the kitchen people will ask them about it. Like, not us. There's a camp nurse, a camp mother. Someone else is in charge of that. And you go talk to them, like, whoa, what's going on over here? one microwave for milkshakes and flakes, and sometimes there was no one in charge. There's just a microwave there for kids with allergies to use if they want.
Right.
Who's taking care of that? Canteen, also very overlooked. You go in there, the kashrus in the camp was perfect, and you go to the canteen, it was like you're serving milkshakes and flakes. Not the can. First of all, the hot food nowadays is not the canteen you probably remember from camp.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe there was frozen pizza that they warmed up. Maybe
it's not the mom's knishes anymore.
No. Now it's gourmet meals. Campers don't like what they serve that night. We'll go get a burger and fries.
Do you always check out the canteen when you go? Yeah. Always.
Again, it's on our list. You mentioned, do we always check it out? There were times where a camp said it's not accessible to us. It's a privately run.
Sometimes it's a private
very
business.
Often.
Yeah.
Often the camp will tell them, too bad, it's a private business, and you're going to let the rabbi in and come, and you're going to listen to what he says. And other times they were like, we don't really have access right now, especially if it's before the season.
Rabbi Calvin, thank you for being here. It's wonderful to speak to you once again.